And so we'll get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Sassi. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. You found your way to our professional development series, and we're really happy about that. Our professional development series meets on Wednesdays at noon throughout the academic year over Zoom in real time. We also archive our events for later viewing on our website. So if you see amazing stuff happen today, and you will, point your colleagues to this recorded video. It'll be posted on our webpage in a little bit. We'll begin today, as we always do, though, with a land acknowledgement.
Okay, Don, just give me a thumbs up whenever you see what I want you to see. Okay, cool. Here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilized the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. We got a couple announcements today, so please keep track of these. A lot of cool stuff coming up. First of all, next week is K-State Social Media Week, and there'll be a number of events next week that kind of deal with that. One I want to put on your radar is next Thursday, April 10th at noon to 1 over Zoom. There'll be an event called Teaching in the Digital Age, Innovations with Digital and Social Media. And there'll be discussion and demonstration. There'll be a panel of people from political science, the A.Q. Miller School of Media and Communication, people from our College of Education, people from tech. I'll be part of the panel as well. So lots of cool stuff going on next week at that digital event. So please do check that out. Also, our SOTL Showcase is coming up. Our SOTL Showcase is an opportunity for you to share innovative teaching practices, innovative research related to teaching. Really, really cool thing. We are accepting submissions for that event. Our submission deadline is next Friday, not this coming Friday, but next Friday, April 11th, end of day. Short Qualtrics form for you to fill out. We got poster presentations, we got oral presentations, and Ashley, as always, is dropping these links into the chat. Information is also available on our website. The event itself will be Monday, May 12th, which is the Monday of Finals Week, from 1:30 to 4:30. The oral presentations will be in person. We will live stream those for people to be able to attend that asynchronously, or I guess not asynchronously, but synchronously in real time. We'll also have a poster presentation in person. That's our only in-person event of the whole year, so we're kind of looking forward to it, but we will allow Zoom people to kind of watch those presentations as they occur too. I'll remind you, you can become a TLC professional development certificate earner by attending enough of our events, doing reflection, those sorts of things. Also, you can potentially become a TLC fellow, and that information is put into the chat as well. That fellow status is reserved for faculty, but the TLC certificate can also be for graduate students. Our next event, we have 5 more events after this week. Our next event is going to be from JT Laverty from the Department of Physics on engaging students as catalysts for improving courses, the KSU Learning Assistant Program. Really cool thing they've got going over there involving their undergraduates as part of their teaching mission. But we got a wonderful one for you today. We have Cydney, Alexis, and Theresa, Merrick, Cassidy here talking about teaching with AI, online teaching in the age of AI, and they've been great partners with us this whole year, engaging in a lot of AI conversations, and I'm really excited for this one today, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Don. We really appreciate it today. Cydney's going to share her screen, and while she's doing that, I'll kind of get us set up for this afternoon. If you haven't met us before, Cydney and I are faculty members in the English department here at K-State. I am also the assistant director of the Writing Center, and so I kind of see everybody in different places across campus and talk about writing. But the two of us have been working all year on a research project that is examining AI in higher education in general, but we're very interested in what's happening here on our campus. The topic of today, which is online teaching in the age of AI, is one we've heard a lot about. I think in our last session here at TLC, that was a topic in the chat that people were asking about. So that's what we're bringing for you today. Our goals are to kind of connect this to all of the AI conversations we've been having. So if you haven't had a chance to access them, or if you're interested, all of our Teaching with AI series talks that we've done in partnership with the Teaching and Learning Center are archived on the TLC website. So feel free to access those, take a look at previous conversations that might tackle different topics other than the one we're going to cover today. Our conversation is going to cover sort of a broad spectrum of challenges and opportunities in online teaching, but just to kind of start things off, this is hard. AI has presented a lot of new challenges to online learning and affected a whole bunch of different contexts of online teaching that I know all of us are still working to tackle. If you feel interested, feel free to include in the chat sort of something that you're working through as a teacher in online learning that might relate to AI. But just to kind of give a brief rundown, AI is having some big impacts on just the sense of accountability and transparency we're trying to foster in students and have to cultivate good engagement between teacher and learner. And sometimes students aren't necessarily feeling able to, or they don't know how to talk about how AI might be impacting their learning experiences and how that might intersect with important issues like academic integrity. And that's often one of the big things. How do we make sure that we are dealing with issues that come up that relate to academic integrity in AI? We want to develop meaningful assignments and assessments, and some of those might have to be adjusted with AI now in the picture. And we want to make sure that we're going to foster learning that will work and be compatible with AI in the future. We want to make sure that students are still engaging in all those skills, critical thinking, really learning the concepts that we want to teach them. Is AI impacting that? And I think a lot of instructors are saying yes, they want to make sure that we can preserve some of those things that were there before AI. And then a big one that I think is just important to talk about is how much work and labor is involved for faculty, instructional designers, any type of staff in higher education in dealing with this topic. It's a lot of work. So we're going to show you some examples that we've been trying that are helping us to kind of engage with AI in ways that go beyond just sort of the bad uses, maybe some potentially good ones in ways that might sort of expand our thinking in this topic. If you don't know, Cydney teaches exclusively online and has so since the onset of ChatGPT. And so you're going to see her talk now about some of the things she's been trying in her classes.
Welcome, everyone. So as you can see, this is a policy that I have for AI in my class, and I think every policy is imperfect, and it really depends on what field you're in, what guidelines are for people in your discipline, and it depends on you as a teacher. But what you're seeing here is my policy, which is a 75-25% rule, and this is not really set in stone. I don't actually measure the 75-25 most of the time, but how I explain this to students is that I want them to be thinking about 75% of contributions coming from their own mind and 25% coming from other sources. And I do a lot of work to help them understand what 25% might mean. So, for example, we have discussions about Grammarly. And the fact that for all intents and purposes, Grammarly is now a large language model like ChatGPT, the instruction and writing guidance that it gives, especially if you're using the pro tools, is basically like using ChatGPT or Claude. And so we have an open discussion about that for a student who is actively using it, that might be their 25%. but it also gives them a lot of space to be playing around with tools. I do think that as time goes on, this 75 is going to lower. That number is going to come down because people students are going to, not just students, but we all are going to learn how to use AI metacognitively. And that's going to affect how we are going to assess AI tool use in our classrooms. And I use a few documents to help me assess where students are at. So what you're seeing on the screen is a statement of AI intent. And I say to students, the purpose of it is to get us on the same page regarding AI use, and that if they change their opinion on AI use, they can fill this out again throughout the term. But I'll show you what this looks like. So you can see that I asked them about their university course writing, how heavily they use AI, which specific tools they use, how they intend to use it in this class, and then, do they understand how Grammarly works? And I put an option out on the table here that if they'd like to discuss AI further, meaning they want to learn how to use it, they want to understand privacy implications like HIPAA, FERPA protections. If they just want to talk to me about AI, then we can meet. And I have, a few students every semester who take me up on that. Even a computer science grad student took me up on that last term. And so they discussed with me a lot of thoughts and feelings and about AI. And I also assessed, there's a question in here that asks them, are you an AI resistor? Do you think AI causes ethical considerations? If I ask students to work with AI this term, do you want to opt out? And so they're able to note that and say, yes, I don't want to work with AI, even if you build that into the course. And I think this is really important because a lot of instructors are requiring AI use. And I just don't think we are quite there yet with requiring all students to use it. We have to account for people who are still working through how they feel about these tools. And also, some students are divulging that they've already been through the honor council, the honor integrity process for AI. So asking those students to use AI is really complicated. And a student divulged that to me on the AI statement this term. He said, I was utilizing it. I had trouble with a certain instructor. I had to go through the honor and integrity process, and now I'm not willing to use it at all, which is a really understandable response. This next document really comes out probably of my training as a lawyer. I went to law school, but I have my students sign a class contract. For online teachers, I think this is really important. So I don't hand out a traditional syllabus anymore. It's a Canvas module. And each policy is a separate page in the module, and students have to interact with it in various ways. I have them check, mark is done, mark each item is done. They have to read each item, and they have to do some activities in this class policies module. At the very end, they sign a class contract. And what they're basically doing is acknowledging all of the policies. And of course, now I have built into this AI use. So I have them state that they understand my 75-25 rule, that they understand how they aren't allowed to use AI. And I really stress that they should not fill this out until they feel comfortable with the course policies. Do I have students every term who still have not read this? Yes, and the same goes for the class policies module. But I have a number of students telling me each semester how much they appreciate this because it really clarifies my expectations and gives them a chance to engage with basically, what is a newer form of the syllabus before they embark in the class. So let's see. And I'm going to share a sample assignment that I used in my recent intermediate science writing class, and I'm using it again with graduate students. And in this assignment, students are asked, this whole unit was about ethics and writing. And I cover some accessibility topics, but we also covered AI. And what I had them do in this first exercise was, it's a paraphrase assignment. So they take a short scientific article, and I asked them to paraphrase 2 significant sentences of this editorial that was about AI, and then paraphrase the editorial as a whole. And I tell them, this needs to be in their own words. I can't prevent them from using AI on this I cannot prevent them from using AI on this stage of the assignment, but they just wouldn't have revelations in the end if they did. And so they're doing this work on their own. And I teach them about paraphrase in videos and other assignments. In exercise 1B, I think this is still, oh no, wait, whoops, gotta go back. I then asked them to use 2 AI tools, ChatGPT and Claude. And I tell them they have to create an account. I talk about, I give them disclaimers talking about the parent companies and issues with privacy and the fact that they have to consider what information and data they're entering into an AI tool, especially if it's a free version of the tool. And so I've routinely been building these disclaimers into my assignments. But at this stage, they ask Claude and ChatGPT to produce versions of the documents that they had previously filled out. And at this point, I'm going to stop the screen share, and Theresa's going to take over for a couple of slides because I'm in a public workspace, and so I can't take my headphones off to be able to play audio.
All right, so I'm going to share something that has some audio and video elements to it while I'm getting that set up. I think what you're hearing, a big theme of our conversation today is that the value of transparency, that looking for ways to cultivate transparent conversations with students about how they're using AI has been really important to us. Because then you can get a better sense of what's going on. But we're also seeing that when you hear and listen to students about how they're analyzing AI, you're hearing some really rich, complex analysis that might align with the goals you're trying to foster in your teaching. So I'm going to play this video where you can hear Cydney break down the assignment as well as hear from the student about how they completed it.
So what you see here is my student Nalen's response to assignment 1A and 1B. And students were asked to make a video that was 5 minutes long. And as you can see, this one, well, actually you can't see the end, it's about 11 minutes. So on the screen is the article that I asked the students to work with, and Nalen has highlighted the sentences that he chose to paraphrase. And then the yellow is his response. He provided them again in paraphrase assignment 1A. So this is his paraphrase of the assignment without the help of AI. And then we'll hear on the right, you see he's provided ChatGPT's response. And so this was the first sentence that ChatGPT paraphrased. So I'll let you hear from him for a second.
May produce varying outputs. Some of the similarities that I noticed was that both paraphrasing talked about the lack of reproducibility or consistency, and that there's inconsistent outputs. These were both of those ideas were key ideas in this sentence. And so I think it's good that both paraphrasing examples had those mentioned. Some of the differences was that I felt that the way I paraphrased it was a little bit more of a summary versus ChatGPT's was just mainly removing what it considered to be filler words, and then even in some cases it used the same words. Like here we can see reduced reproducibility, and pretty much the same thing here. It was almost like it was just condensing this sentence into a sentence that fit that word limit. And then with the second sentence,
so what you see here is my student Nalen's response.
Sorry, there we go, Cydney. Is there anything you wanted to say about this visual? Okay. Here's another one. You're going to hear some more conversation from Cydney and from the student, just kind of breaking down the process a little more. Let me know if I should adjust my audio at all or if that was okay.
So towards the middle of this video, Nalen is explaining the second part of the paraphrase exercise where they had to paraphrase the article as a whole. In 1A, they had to do this on their own, and then they utilized AI. And so I'm going to play a clip now that shows Nalen working through that part of the assignment.
I thought it did a better job of paraphrasing here, since it was taking the general idea from this whole from the whole article. I think that's just because there's more. It's able to better generalize it than just trying to have to create out of just a single sentence. I did feel like the writing in this response felt a lot more robotic than my writing, because in a lot of cases it felt like when it was initially writing it, any word that was a certain that was too small, it felt like it just replaced it with a larger word just for essentially no reason, especially when, like, in cases where it wouldn't make as much sense, it was just trying to always use a bigger word. I felt like throughout all three of the cases with the two one-sentence paraphrasing and the full sentence, I felt like I preferred my paraphrasing in each case. I felt like when I was paraphrasing, I was trying to more retell the idea versus the AI was trying to just reword or reorder the sentence or article. And that I felt like the way I paraphrased it, it could be better directly inserted into an article versus ChatGPT's could not as well.
So what I love about this example is just by allowing students that space to kind of think through the details of their use. I'm going to stop share while I talk here too, so Cydney can start sharing again. You hear a little bit more critical thinking applied to AI tools, but also I think it's important to recognize that students often are making good choices about when to use AI and when not to use AI, and their reasoning is often something we can build on as instructors to keep fostering that AI literacy. And as you can see, Naylan was doing a good job of that as he moved through the assignment the way Cydney set it up. But we're still muted, Cydney.
What you're seeing now on the screen is an assignment that I have students turn in with every major unit project. And so this is a project reflection. And on the left is the assignment. So all the kinds of things I ask them to detail when they're turning this in, everything from their process to any assistance that they had. And on the right is one of Naylan's responses. And the way that I explain this is that I want students to detail their work process, understanding that, I don't live in their head, so I don't know what's going on as they're working. And it's everything from every reader's eyes they've had on the project, as well as AI tools used, as well as decision making when they hit roadblocks, how they work through them. And so you can see some of that on the screen, which Naylan discussed. This has been important to me before AI entered the scene, because what I found is that there's often a default of instructors thinking that when a student turns a work in, they've only had eyes on the page. And I needed to find a way to normalize students sharing all the eyes they've had on their project. And so I would say, tell me if your mom, dad, grandparents, partner, husband, wife, sister, everyone who's had eyes on the project. And I also want to hear when they're thinking and working about the project at downtimes, when they wouldn't consider this writing per se, because a lot of people mischaracterize writing as just when pen is on the paper, but there's a lot of work that goes into writing beforehand. So I'm having them think about walks that they take when they're thinking about the project and discussions they have, or learning that they're doing in other classes that coincides with this. And I do think that the setup of the assignment helps students to really think about this. So I've become dependent on this. I love reading them, and students, they get more elaborate as the semester goes on and as they learn what I value in these responses. So here we know that we get a lot of questions about quizzes and tests and how we're creating them in the age of AI. And frankly, this is just a challenge, and it's a challenge because I teach television and film classes as well. And I want students to be able to name techniques and to be able to visualize techniques. And I'm aware now that they can go to ChatGPT, Claude, or the internet and find a plot summary for every television episode or film that we watch. They can take a video, and an AI source can make a video, an AI resource can take a video and discuss what's going on inside of it. And so it really takes some creative maneuvering. And so I'm just going to give you a look at what this looks like, both in terms of I tell students how to navigate the test, but these are in it. So actually, I'll pause it. I'll go back a little bit. This first slide, I have students do some work on their own that they deposit into the test. So they have time throughout the unit to do it. And I do things like I'm asking students to provide a screenshot of a moment. So here it is, pick 3 moments in Jaws that exemplify trademarks of Steven Spielberg's cinematography. Yes, there are various ways that they can use AI to achieve this, but in the end, they have to provide a screenshot. They have to provide timestamps of this moment in the film. They have to tell me why they picked the trademarks, and they have to communicate the relationship between that moment and the film as a whole. So when answers are really vague, that's when I can kind of tell that students either haven't watched the film. These are other examples of this. But I'm also, posting videos and asking students to name the technique and to state answers. And so this is what I can answer more questions in depth about this in Q&A. But I have them do matching exercises. Pretty hard for them to rely on AI. They would just run out of time on the test if they were not prepared, which does happen in a lot of cases. So that's an example of that. Another idea that you can use is you can utilize AI to try and help you think about how to make tests. I have a friend in chemistry who I've been working with and trying to help her use AI to produce test questions and to just brainstorm creative ways to approach testing. But here I've asked Claude to identify trouble spots where students may or may not use AI. And so you can see both what Claude produced and then I asked it for a sample assignment with reduced AI risk. And, in response to the comment in the chat, I think a lot about what information I'm willing to give AI. Claude has stricter privacy regulations. They care about privacy, company. They've done a lot of work around that. And I do subscribe to a pro version, but I still think about what I do and don't want to share. So is that okay? For example. So what you see on the screen is Claude helping to define parts of assignments that might be that might be human zones and parts of assignments that might be AI zones. And so that's something that you can delimit with students and have really rich conversations about what type of work and thinking we want to make sure that we keep to humans only, and then what parts of assignments we're willing to bring AI into the conversation with. Oh, and Theresa, did you want to take over this?
Yeah, so Cydney's kind of shown you some examples more specifically in how that looks. And I think it's important for us to note that I think the two of us are not necessarily pro AI or like advocating for constant AI use in our classes, especially online. It gets very complicated very quickly. But we understand that AI literacy might be, you know, a responsibility for us to teach as educators, sort of speaking to Dawn's question, how we tackle this when workplaces are saying they want students to have this skill, and that there are ways you can put limitations and boundaries around AI use while still kind of providing opportunities to understand AI and where it has its uses and drawbacks. And so these things on the list here are offering some activities that students might explore that aren't focused on the actual output of an assignment itself, that kind of steering them away from producing content that is part of what they turn in and getting them to think about the tools in other ways. So submitting presentations for a dissertation workshop or something that they're presenting inside a pro tool that has those protections, and asking AI to generate a set of questions that the committee might ask. So it's getting kind of like that feedback loop inside AI that students might find really helpful. You know, having AI help generate, you know, study questions based on the notes that the students have already put together, kind of thinking, what am I going to be asked about? Do I know my stuff? Asking AI to read and kind of be critical as a particular audience member when they're working on a piece of writing. You know, have it provide questions and get them to really think about whether their work is going to achieve the goals that you've laid out for your assignment. Asking AI to poke holes in an argument. There's lots of conversation about this online, that AI tools are becoming smarter at being argumentative than humans, which is a scary thought, but it means that they can be very valuable for students trying to kind of think about different perspectives and how to respond to them. Asking AI if it's familiar with published work that's out there to help students understand arguments or research conversations, giving examples of opposing arguments and how to argue positions. So all of these are not saying to an AI tool, create this thing for me, but help me to better understand a topic, help me to better understand my task, kind of work for me in ways that you know, I can get feedback and a response that then will then put the impetus on me to then put the work in. So these are some things that you might try in your classroom or encourage students to try. And then the other thing we recommend is, if you are uncertain about AI, if you haven't tackled it yet, if you're not really sure how to work through it with your students yet, or you haven't really dipped your toe in the waters very much yet, that one thing you can try is to see how it might work in your teaching tasks. That a lot of instructors are seeing the value of using AI to make them more efficient at the things that are really burdensome day to day. So things like creating test questions, changing up feedback, creating study guides that students might be able to use themselves. That type of stuff takes me a really long time to put together for my students. And also I can get stuck in a box myself about the type of feedback that I'm providing on student work, the types of structures I'm giving to my assignments. And so asking AI to also be that feedback tool for me, you know, am I providing, you know, full commentary in ways that students might understand? Can you suggest different ways that I could phrase this comment that I'm going to put on student work? Can you think about how I, as an instructor, might phrase this in a more empathetic way or to be more helpful? Again, these are not focused on generating text per se, but giving me a way to kind of have that, you know, sounding board, also reduce a lot of the workload of the really repetitive tasks that we do as instructors. So getting a tool to kind of try things out that way can be really, really helpful. Lastly, you know, we're all aware of some of the big tools, and there's been some questions about sort of the types of tools we might have access to on campus in the chat. We just wanted to kind of throw a few out there that do different things, or that you might not have heard about, that might offer you, again, opportunities to explore AI in different ways. TurboScribe is one that Cydney and I have used a lot for our own research when we're collecting data and trying to get transcripts put together. There are a lot of transcription tools that, you know, predate AI, but something that we've been finding really helpful is just how much AI is optimizing the process of making sure this type of data and transcripts are going to meet the accessibility guidelines that we're on our campus are going to have to meet. And so these types of tools, because they're more AI informed, are helping that process to be more efficient. So that's one that's really great for any researchers here in the conversation, or anybody who's, you know, going through large sets of qualitative data and might want help with that. Gamma AI does a lot of presentation work, so kind of building presentations that work with different audiences, have different styles. Sometimes I personally get really stuck in PowerPoint's world and I need a different perspective, so tools like that have been really helpful. Descript is an integration or a tool that can work inside other LLMs like ChatGPT. What its focus is producing videos. And so if that's one portion of your online teaching where you're really struggling with just the technology, a tool like Descript takes your speaking notes, takes your outlines and your plans, and it generates a video for you that you could then have a lot of power to edit, to rewrite. You can change the look of it, but it's one of the many tools coming out that is offering that kind of area of expertise to educators or anybody who's doing video production. We've mentioned Claude already. Cydney sort of talked about how it's a, part of Anthropic, which is a company that seems to be paying a bit more attention to things like privacy. It's really good for any writing tasks, and I think it does a better job with writing than ChatGPT does, for example. And so that's one you might want to explore. Notebook LM is part of Google's suite of AI tools. It's one that we hear a lot of students use, and even some faculty member colleagues have talked about how they've used it as well. It essentially creates a space, like an online space that can encompass a few different ways to engage with a piece of text or a research idea. It can create podcasts out of text so that you can listen to things, which a lot of people prefer. It can also be a space where you store study guides, any notes that you're taking when you're working on a particular topic. And all of these ones are ones that we recommend either subscribing to the pro versions of. We do not have access to any of these on campus. So to speak to Cindy's question in the chat, we sort of have one enterprise level access to Copilot on campus, which is part of our Microsoft suite. I say we sort of do in that we technically have that enterprise or private level access, but that's not something that we know might fully scale to campus yet. Our IT people are still working that out. But for now, you can log into Copilot through your K-State account, and you will see up in the top right of your page when you're working in it, that little shield symbol that indicates that the conversations there are private, protected, and are not shared with the training data. But at the moment, that is the only enterprise level sort of subscription that we have access to.
And just a couple notes about TurboScribe and web accessibility. I've been using it. I've been taking old videos that I produced that I didn't have transcripts for and producing transcripts in TurboScribe. It will take you can take general notes and make a script in ChatGPT. You can take your TurboScribe transcripts and have Claude clean them up. And so I had made a lecture on the French New Wave cinema, and Claude was able to recognize where all of the accent marks should go and all of the leading figures' names. So it was just really helpful. But TurboScribe has strict privacy, confidentiality protections, since it knows that researchers are using it to transcribe. And
that covers sort of what we wanted to share with you today, but we have time to kind of continue a conversation about something you have questions about. We just wanted to note that, as you see, we did get permission to include some student conversations in our video today, and you'll have access to that on the TLC website. But the actual assignment files and things like that, we're not going to post publicly. If you have any questions or want to see any of them in more detail, you're very welcome to email us, and we'd be happy to share some of those details.
So one of the things I just want to kind of state, it's not a question, is I really do appreciate the kind of balanced approach you take to this topic, because I've kind of found in my own conversations that there's a bimodal distribution. There's the people that like AI is the devil and no one should use it for any reason. And then there's the AI is the future. And if you're not using it, you're an old fashioned relic and all of these kind of things. And I really appreciate you kind of saying, hey, there's some nuance here and there's some pros and some cons, and we've got to kind of figure that out. I also really appreciate kind of the practical ways, Cydney, and sharing all those class materials and stuff that you've done. I feel very, very validated in a lot of the kind of reservations that I've had, as well as a little bit of the excitement that I've had, because I feel like I didn't fall into either one of those kind of bimodal distribution points. So I just wanted to say that I appreciated that to start.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
So what questions do we have for our speakers? Because if people don't have stuff, I'm going to start talking more. So what questions do we have?
I have a question which maybe sort of tangentially related, and that is when I think about the way that an LLM functions, or sort of the way it thinks and how different that is than the way we think, that I think is insightful and important. And I was wondering if that is part of some of the descriptive sort of pieces that you help students come to so that they can see, oh yeah, it really wouldn't be good for this task or that task, versus I have friends who've used it to do this, so I'll use it to do that. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I find myself talking about this all the time, like what it means, what word prediction means, and how you explain that, this is a tool that is essentially predicting the most likely word to come next, and you can forget that when you're interacting with an LLM. And I'll just state that if I were in a face-to-face classroom, I would be bringing in AI all of the time and teaching metacognitive skills and really going into the deep with this. And I do this as much as I can in an online class. So through videos, yes, I do explain that to students. I explain how the technology functions. Because we also hear in our qualitative research that people are developing really strong feelings for AI already, naming it, giving it a gender. And so you can lose some of the sense of how it's actually functioning. So I think this is, like, as you saw in one of the assignments, that human, non-human aspect is really important, thinking about, let students also participate in this, in saying, here are the types of tasks that we want to reserve for humans as in part of this class, and then here's the ones where we want to explore with AI. But to answer your question, yes, and Theresa might have a response too, because she's gotten to talk a lot with students in the face-to-face classroom also about AI.
Yeah, I think I really love your question because it is something that I've been wrestling with. And I think if you look online for other, there's a lot of people putting out really great assessment tools or like ways students can disclose how they use AI, which I find really, really helpful. But one of the things I'm running into is that some of those tools kind of are doing what you're suggesting, Anthony, is that it's putting AI use into very discrete type of categories that don't always fit for certain types of writers. And so one of the ways I'm really trying to think about that is, and something that Cydney and I are working on for another presentation this week, is that if we access or start with asking people's motivations for using AI, like what they want from it, why they want it, is it something that's very internal to them, as in it's giving them access to things they don't have? Is it giving them opportunities for accessibility or accommodation? I feel like AI is becoming an accommodation tool for a lot of people. I want to be able to listen to that. And those types of things don't fit in, well, I'm only going to use AI in this stage of my writing process or in this stage of my ideation. I think they're helpful starting points to say that here are some useful ways that AI might interact with your brainstorming phase. This is where it might safely interact with the editing that you need to do on your work. But again, I feel like I'm constantly breaking down those boxes again, because a writer will come to us and tell us something we hadn't even thought of about how they're using AI. And so I do think, like you're saying, it's important to honor that students should be learning their own individual ways to work with AI, to develop an identity around their own writing, and to be able to distinguish that between their work and AI work, and to kind of leave room for some flexibility in how we assess it in the classroom. So kind of a long-winded explanation, but yeah, I think what you're saying is really, really helpful.
So I wanted to just kind of add on to an experience that I recently had with a student taking an in-person class with me. So maybe a slightly different situation. They'd taken a take-home exam. Visual inspection on that exam was like ChatGPT had a hand in this, right? So I met with the student. The student's like, I did not use ChatGPT to do my exam. I did not. And I was like, your answers are matching, the ChatGPT output on this. And they said, I didn't use ChatGPT to work on my exam, but it was a take-home exam. They could use their notes. They said they used ChatGPT to fill out their note guides. So they didn't come to class, they used ChatGPT to fill out their note guides, and then they took the ChatGPT language from the note guide and put it on the exam. And didn't connect the points that if you use ChatGPT to fill out your note guides, then your notes are ChatGPT notes, not my notes. So you mentioned, students are bringing up these other ways. That student legitimately didn't think they legitimately thought they didn't cheat because they didn't take my test questions and put it in ChatGPT. So I think that, you know, Cydney, you had kind of these ways that they have to disclose it. I'm not sure that student would have even disclosed because they wouldn't have put it together that that was something that was helping them on their exam. So it's really just finding new things happening in this domain are just kind of blowing my mind this semester.
Yeah, and I have a few students who are pretty open that they like to use AI, and what I see is this really advanced level of complexity in their assignments as well when they're making videos. How they're talking through ideas is really complex, and they're doing a lot of metacognitive work. And I get less worried when they're integrating AI on their assignments because I have a picture of it. I think what you're speaking to, Don, is how do we get to that point where we can have these discussions with students where they do connect that dot or they care about that connection. And I think this is just changing so rapidly. In 10 years, we may look back on this. It's going to be so integrated that, you know, we can't have the same type of discussion about it, but retaining this conversation of awareness and, you know, being able to talk through what your process is like and which stage of it you have permission to utilize these tools and what you need to disclose.
I've really loved like Camilla Roberts, as we all know in this chat, who's just doing amazing things in the Office of Academic Integrity. Like her reminders to me and to everybody that, you know, we've had problems with plagiarism and academic honesty long before AI, and it has provided access to these types of, you know, academic honesty issues to a broader audience potentially now that these things are on the platform. But there's a group of students that are going to always be very difficult to reach, to persuade that, you know, taking the time to work through the learning goals and not constantly look for shortcuts. Like they're always going to be there. And I'm going to do my best to reach them and to give them as many opportunities as possible to, you know, learn how to kind of think through these tools responsibly. But like those students are always there. And I think, yeah, they're distinguishing between ones who truly don't know, like in the example you're saying, Dawn, and the ones who are going to cheat because that's just what they're going to do. I think I've been really trying to make the distinction between those two as much as I can.
I think what is complicating this is that every instructor has a different AI policy, right? So it's, you know, I've kind of noticed with a lot of students, you know, I mention them and I say, did you use AI on the assignment? They say, yeah, of course I did. You know, so it's not a compunction about it. Like this is, you know, everyone's telling me this is a wonderful tool to use. I can use it in my other classes, you know. So I think it's sort of so inconsistent. It's almost unfair on some of our students to kind of think about, you know, and I try to be as reminding as I can about the rules in my class, but I also know that the rules in my class are not the rules in someone else's class. And it's hard for them to navigate that. I'm trying to be as empathetic as I can to that, but it's just very challenging right now.
I think it's really hard. I had a case um, because I'm on the honor council, and you know there was a case where someone used coding software to double check their work, and I had an out of body moment where I pictured in 20 years us looking back on this conversation and how strange it would seem that there was this like restriction in place, like on kind of assessment of one's own work at the same time that I'm super empathetic to rules that prohibit AI use in order to develop certain skills. But, you know, it's just a really hard, it's a hard issue because if it's 3 a.m. and you're by yourself and you haven't been able to have access to your teacher and you're really stressing about an assignment, I think we all can empathize with wishing that we could have another set of eyes on a project. And so how we understand that and have conversations with students about that is important.
I always think about whenever new technologies come up, I think about like past technologies, you know, that like everyone freaked out when the calculator was invented because this would be the end of math and no students would learn math anymore. And when, you know, cars first were invented, they had horse heads that they would put on the front of them because people were freaked out about like horseless carriages. And so, you know, and much like now, self-driving cars, they put like a fake driver in the car so that you feel like there's a driver there. I mean, all of these things, it's just like, we often feel like really uncomfortable with new technology. And I think that that's appropriate. I mean, I expressed a lot of concerns in the chat about transparency, about, you know, material rights, whose rights are you giving away when you're putting material into AI, and how do you navigate that? There's a lot of issues related to bias in AI tools and the way that they're developed. And so I think that it's appropriate to be concerned and skeptical, but I also think that like running around like this is kind of the end of everything is maybe not not necessary. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're in the same space as you regarding that.
Well, we are about out of time. So if you please help me thank our presenters today, both Cydney and Theresa, for an excellent job kind of expanding and blowing our minds about AI. Thank you so much. This has been a continued effort throughout this year. We've been very excited about that. I want to remind you in the audience that we have a post-event survey we'd love you to complete. We also have a wonderful event next week by JT Laverty from the Department of Physics on engaging students as a catalyst for improving our courses. He'll be talking about a learning